The Baltimore Ravens continue to be tied to a lot of these top receivers that are on the trade block, like Deebo Samuel and Cooper Kupp, or free agent receivers like T. Higgins. Let's take a detailed look at all of the available free agents, and I'll give my thoughts on what I see the Ravens actually doing at wide receiver this offseason in this episode of the Flock Rundown.
Ravens Flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown, episode number 2 for the day. I did drop a coaching updates episode on the new coaching hires that we added to defense, so if you haven't checked that out, go watch that. But this episode is going to be diving into these wide receiver rumors, these trade rumors that people keep tying the Ravens to, and we're also going to look at all of the free agent wide receivers that are available and kind of see who's realistic and who makes sense to add to this current wide receiver room for the Ravens. So Adam Schefter's responsible for tying Deebo Samuel to the Ravens. He did say on the Pat McAfee show that he could see Deebo Samuel in Pittsburgh or Baltimore.
I could see him in Pittsburgh. I could see him in Baltimore.
And we know Deebo Samuel's definitely getting traded. We've done business with the Niners before. It does make sense. He does have a $15 million cap hit this year, but he is in his last year, so whoever ends up trading for him, that money's going to get moved. He's going to get extended a year or two. I don't think the money's actually going to be that big of a deal. I don't think he'll be cheap to pay. You know, it's at least probably like a $10 million plus per year, but he is in the latter half of his career. His production has declined. I don't think it's going to take a big draft pick to go get a guy like that. But do the Ravens need a Deebo Samuel? We currently have Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Tez Walker under contract. Nelson Aguilar and Tylan Wallace are free agents. So the Ravens are going to add some receivers, whether that's through the draft, through free agency, through a trade. There's no doubt another receiver or 2 or 3 are on the way to Baltimore. But does Deebo make sense? I don't know. I don't think it's worth making a trade for a receiver, to be honest with you, unless it's like a top guy. You know, if we're talking about going to get a DK Metcalf or an AJ Brown or you know, someone of that caliber to go get that true X that Eric DeCosta also talked about just a week ago, that they've been trying to get that X.
We drafted Hollywood, we drafted Zay, we drafted Bate. We've allocated a lot of resources. We don't have that. The one piece we probably have missed on is that big X presence. We've never really had that. We've tried to find that guy. That guy doesn't go on trees, right? They're hard to find those kind of guys, right? That's probably the one thing.
If it's for a big X receiver like a AJ or DK or somebody of that caliber, then yeah, I'm for the Ravens kind of sticking their neck out there and getting it. But I think we have more priorities on the offensive line and defensive line than we do at receiver. But we have to add to the room. I'm just thinking that maybe giving up a draft pick and also having to pay, you know, even if it's like 10, 12, 15 million, I think that's probably just too much right now for your wide receiver 3. Deebo Samuel would be a continued gadget guy. He'd have a role in this offense, but he wouldn't be the go-to guy. And he would instantly be making more than Zay and Bateman because they have cheaper deals right now. So I don't know. I don't think it's very likely, but I don't think it doesn't make any sense. I think adding a guy for cheap like Deebo Samuel, I don't think we'd have to give up much. Literally a 5th round pick or something. Like, everyone knows he's on the trade block. He's turning 30. His production has been declining. He's had some injuries. I mean, I don't think Deebo's going to command a high draft pick. So you really could kind of steal him, but are you willing to pay him, you know, 10 plus million for a couple more years to be that gadget guy on your offense? I just don't know if that's going to be a big enough priority for the Ravens. So I'm not against adding Deebo Samuel, but I don't think that's a likely option. And it kind of fits in the same category as Cooper Kupp. You know, I don't think you have to give up a ton for Cooper Kupp to go trade for him. I love Cooper Kupp as a player. I do think he's got a couple more valuable years left, but his contract is not going to be cheap. Even when you extend him and move money around, like, these guys still for the next few years are making over $10 million. And I think the Ravens are either going to add a receiver in the draft or go value hunting in free agency. Let's turn our attention to all of the available free agents this offseason. That includes some Ravens free agents. And we'll just start from the top guys are kind of in like a dreamland territory like a T. Higgins, and go all the way down to some value guys like a Demarcus Robinson or somebody like that. So the top wide receiver free agents, T. Higgins clearly leads that list to me. I think he is going to get paid. I don't see it being on the Bengals unless they figure something out. He's been putting out a lot of subliminal posts and things like that. I just would be shocked if the Ravens ever spent that kind of money on a wide receiver. He's probably going to make $30 million a year. I just can't see it, but I would love T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins is a beast. It's just living in fantasy land, man. There's no way the Ravens are going to do this. That's kind of the title of this video, you know. This is insane to even think that T. Higgins, or honestly even trading for guys like Deebo and Cooper Kupp, it's probably very unlikely, but I do want to go over everyone here. So T. Higgins leads my list of free agent wide receivers. He is at the top, but he's just priced out of Baltimore's territory. And then you got guys like Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Keenan Allen. I think that there is value there. I wouldn't mind adding a Stephon Diggs, a Keenan Allen, a Chris Godwin. I think I'd steer away from Amari Cooper right now, to be honest, but I definitely like Chris Godwin and Keenan Allen and Diggs, even though Diggs is coming off an ACL. These are guys that would have a really good role with Baltimore, but is it worth it? They're not going to be cheap. These guys are still going to make over $10 million, and I just don't think the Ravens are going to get one of those guys because of their cap situation and because of how much we need to add to the defensive and offensive line. So the draft and the bottom of the barrel free agents seem to be the most likely. But let me know what your thoughts are. Maybe we can go get a Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen for cheaper than I think. And at that point, I think that's worth adding a veteran into that wide receiver 3 role. And then moving down the list a little bit, we got Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, definitely not coming back. DeAndre Hopkins is kind of interesting. I don't think he would have a huge role. He would definitely be cheap. He's talked before about how he would love to play with Lamar Jackson. I wouldn't be shocked if we added a DeAndre Hopkins to this team, but his role might be similar to what he had in Kansas City, where he's just kind of a move the chains guy or a red zone target, which I'm not against, man. If DeAndre Hopkins would take a deal under $10 million and, you know, we could have like a $5 million cap hit or something like that, I think I'd be open to adding DeAndre Hopkins to this room. I don't think that would be the only addition, but I don't think that's a terrible idea. And then there's Mike Williams, Robert Woods, Hollywood Brown, Darius Slayton, Demarcus Robinson, who's been here before, Nelson Aguilar, DJ Chark, Mac Hollins, Tyler Boyd, Elijah Moore, Rondell Moore, Justin Watson, Tutu Atwell, Steven Sims, who was just here, Tylan Wallace, Deontay Hardy, Josh Palmer's another interesting name down there. There's a lot of free agent wide receivers this year, and I think the top, obviously, like T. Higgins is going to get paid, but there's going to be a lot of value too. So I almost guarantee you that the Ravens do sign somebody out of this list. I think they will go get a free agent wide receiver, and I don't think it's going to be someone that they bring back like Nelson Aguilar. I could see him bringing back Steven Sims potentially, but I do see them going out and getting a guy. I wouldn't be against bringing Demarcus Robinson back. I feel like he's just been underrated his entire career and has contributed everywhere he's went. And we've had him here before when we had a really weak wide receiver core, and him and Lamar did have a connection. Demarcus Robinson was one of our most consistent receivers that year. I've seen some people talk about bringing Hollywood Brown back. I just don't think that there's that type of role for that type of receiver in this offense. I mean, if Hollywood wasn't happy being our number 1 receiver, having 1,000 yards, and I know that was a Greg Roman offense, and we have evolved since then, but Hollywood's not going to be our number 1 at all. He'd be number 3. So I just really don't see that type of receiver having a big role for the Ravens, and therefore Hollywood's not going to want to come here, even though he's tight with Lamar and has been here before. He's just not going to have a big enough role. Zay's occupying what his role would be. I could see us bringing back Steven Sims just in a deeper wide receiver role and also punt returner role, which he did play this year. I don't know if that's going to be their main option, but the fact that he can do multiple things always increases his value. And Josh Palmer's still a young name on this list that I think sticks out and has some upside. He was just on the Chargers. He might re-sign with the Chargers. Obviously, a lot of these guys could re-sign with their team, but I wouldn't be against bringing in somebody like that. I think all these moves just add depth to the room. I don't think that we're going to sign a guy that surpasses Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman's role. I'd be shocked if we did that, because then we'd be allocating a lot of resources to the wide receiver position. And the only way I would want to do that is if we're going and getting a guy. You know what I mean? A DK Metcalf, an AJ Brown, or a T Higgins or whatever. Like, if we're going to get someone like that, that's going to just be our number one instantly, then yeah, I'm okay with investing some resources, even though I prefer to stack the offensive line. I'm okay with going and getting that aggressive. But when it comes to like paying up for Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel on an extension, I'm cool with bringing in those guys, but I just don't think that I would invest a ton of cap resources into keeping them. I mean, they're older, they're declining, and they're still not that cheap. So it really depends. I mean, if you can get the cap hit, below 10 million, I think that bringing them in as wide receiver 3 does increase and add to our offense. It does help. But as boring as it may sound, I think staying patient in free agency and letting a lot of these values drop for some of these deeper wide receiver free agents is the way to go. And you could sign a Demarcus Robinson for, a $5 million deal, but he's got like a $2 million cap hit or something like that. I think that is getting more bang for your buck. And then you could add another guy through the draft. You could always bring back a Tylan Wallace or Steven Sims. I think that bringing back Tylan Wallace is definitely still on the table. We also have Tez Walker under contract. He's probably going to take a leap. I highly doubt that his role decreases from last year, so I think he'll be more involved, and they're expecting big things out of him. Not to say that he's our immediate wide receiver 3. We'll see how this offseason shakes out, but I definitely think they see him being in an expanded role, and they just didn't draft him for nothing. So if I had to predict how this is going to play out for the Ravens, I think that we bargain hunt in free agency for a guy like Demarcus Robinson. I don't know who exactly that player would be, but I would take him. I think even a DeAndre Hopkins is definitely on the table as well. I think adding him would be kind of like a cheaper Odell, deal that we did. We paid Odell way too much. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is commanding anything like that, but we could do that type of deal where, he has a role in this offense. I would not be against that. And then just bringing back a Tylan Wallace potentially and adding in the draft. I think this is the Ravens offseason plan at wide receiver, and I'm not mad at it. Obviously, I would love to have that dominant true X, that true number one go-to guy. And if the Ravens can pull a trade off like that, like the Eagles did for AJ Brown, if that is on the table, then I'd be for that for sure. I'd be going to get a true X number one guy, but I wouldn't do it if it's going to prevent us from adding to the offensive or defensive line, because I stand on that is the most important thing for the Ravens to build this offseason, and a lot of it's going to be done through the draft. There's no doubt, man. We got 11 picks. We're going to add to the offensive and defensive line in the draft. We're going to draft another wide receiver. What do you think's the most likely to happen? What would you do if you were Eric DeCosta? Would you just attack through the draft and stack up the O-line and the D-line? Or do you think that wide receiver is a big priority for this team? But that's it for today, guys. I appreciate you, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll let the greatest linebacker in the history of the game take us out.
Ravens Flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. The Flock Rundown. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense. Can't